bring mixed media to your card making and create tons of texture and depth and interest on your cards. Here we have Altenew Tropical Jungle, and immediately I thought of a super layered rainforest with lots of depth to it and bright colors. And so I'm going to start off with a 5x7 gel press and some teal and green ink here, or acrylic paint. And I'm just going to take the excess paint off with my brayer, and I'm going to keep the gel press pretty short today. I've done a lot of gel press videos recently, and that's because it was a new process to me. I wasn't super experienced with it, and so when I start a new medium, I really like to do it a lot so that I can learn about it and be able to share some tips and kind of some do's and don'ts with you guys so that you have a better idea of how to do it as well, so we can learn together. So I just used a lift technique with one of the Tropical Jungle stamps and lifted off some of that acrylic paint, and I put down a piece of premium copy paper and just pulled that print. That'll be my background for one of my cards, and here I have another one of the stamps from the set. I'm going to stamp this in olive green ink. I am going to leave my stamp in the MISTI just in case I want to switch to black ink at the end of this. Sometimes I think I want to do no line water or no line coloring, and then at the end I really crave that black outline. So I always leave my stamp in the MISTI just in case. So I have Altenew artist markers here. I have them on the left-hand side in the order that I've used them in the video. Of course, I go back and forth, but you can see the colors there for your reference. It's so much easier, you guys, to share the colors with you now that I have the marker labels on the markers. So I'm really excited that Altenew came out with those. Much easier to be able to look back and share the colors with you. So I started off with some pink tips and then started to add bamboo, ultimately in olive, and ultimately I switched to grass field and firefly because the olive was a little too yellow for me. When I started to look at the tropical forest colors compared to my background, that background is a really vibrant green, and so that's why I switched to grass field and firefly to get a more vibrant green on these leaves. As always, a link to the full list of supplies will be in the description of this video down below on YouTube. And this is also part of the Altenew Exotic Garden blog hop and giveaway. So be sure to not only leave a comment here on YouTube, but also on my blog so that you're in for a chance to win a gift card to shop Altenew. I always look forward to reading your comments, and I finally remembered to zoom in on my coloring here, you guys. So hopefully that's helpful for you to be able to see the tip of the marker a little bit more clearly on the paper with it being zoomed in. I pretty much use the same formula anytime I'm coloring leaves or flowers. I make sure that I have a lot of dark shadow where there's a crease in the petal or the leaf, where a leaf is overlapping, and where there would be a casted shadow like from a leaf onto the stem. If your coloring is looking pretty flat, try using a darker color for your shadows. It's most likely that you don't have a big enough range in your values. Leave some white for your highlights if you can. Sometimes that gets away from me. Like you can see, I don't have any white left over in my highlights here, but my shadows are dark enough to give it some depth. Now, I did want to, I'm glad I left it in my MISTI, the stamp, because I did want to bring some of the detail of these leaves back to this image. And so this time I'm going to stamp it in grass field. So just like I changed the markers over to grass field, I'll change my stamping to grass field instead of olive. And I did stamp this a couple times. Before I die cut this with the coordinating die, I will adhere this to a piece of black sticky back fun foam and die cut it so that I have it popped up without having to use a bunch of foam squares. This is actually one of my waste papers from the gel press printing process. So when I clean my brayer, sometimes I like to do it on a piece of old book, like an old book page. And that just gives me more texture. It gives me a different look. Like I don't usually use a tan colored paper like this. So it can give you more of that rustic look. And this was really starting to look like one of those travel posters. And I loved the look of these strips, so I decided to incorporate that into the design. And you can see me just playing around with exactly where I want it. And I decided I would use that tan paper to stamp my sentiment on so that it's nice and legible, because it would not have shown up on this busy background at all. So I'll go ahead and stamp that in Obsidian Pigment Ink, and I just glued those strips directly to the paper. I'm going to cover that up with a scrap piece of paper and add some splatter with some jet black ink spray, because you know I'm going to need that if I have a black sentiment and there's not any black on the rest of the paper. I'll clean that with a baby wipe and then dry the surface with a microfiber cloth. Otherwise, if the cardstock gets damp, it tends to curl up. I don't know if that happens to you guys. So by using mixed media techniques with the acrylic paints, the gel press, the alcohol markers, the old book page, you're able to create so much texture and depth on this card that it really does give that rainforest vibe. I created several prints, and hang with me to the end because I'll show you a couple that I created in one of my art journals. And here I have the Dovetail Butterfly stamp set. So I die cut out a couple butterflies, went ahead and stamped those with some Obsidian Pigment Ink, and then check out the new Instant Dimension foam tape. It has lovely packaging, and you could actually fussy cut that out and use that on a card, or just cut it into an A2 size card and use that as a panel if you like as well. So this is a huge roll of foam dimension tape here. I just need a little bit, and I'm just putting it right down the center of the butterfly so that I can curl up the wings and get even more dimension on this textured background. Now, the stenciling that you see at the bottom is the Deco Wallpaper stencil. That's one of my favorite stencils. And it adds the perfect amount of pattern, texture, and contrast to this background and the butterflies. So I love this distressed mixed media feel. For the last card, I grabbed another book page that I had just brayered off some paint onto, and I'm stamping the Simply Spring stamp set. This is a gorgeous floral arrangement. It's super huge. Look at the size of this die. And I decided, to just die cut this out. Of course, I have the straight edges from the book page, and I'm just going to butt that up into the corner of my A2 size card panel here. I love the high contrast of the stark white background, so I opted to use the Simply Hello sentiment in all just Neenah Classic Cross Solar White cardstock to further that contrast. And of course, I got a little crazy with my black splatter there. Here are the 3 cards together and the 2 journal pages that I made. So before I started making the cards, I kind of played around in my journal to see what I could accomplish with the gel press and these stamps, and I love the layered textures here as well. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think of these mixed media techniques for card making in the comments down below, so be sure to leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I'll see you soon with more inspiration.